First, I want to acknowledge that one of the things that has helped me be a more resilient parent, both to my son when he was living and to my other two children, is to remember something that's common to all parents, regardless of their family situation. We all want to be the best parent that we can be to each of our children. This is a universal truth. It drives us. It's very hard to feel like you're living up to that responsibility when one of your children is demanding more time and energy and resources than the other ones. And I know from my own experience that it creates a lot of worry and anxiety. Am I doing enough? Am I being good enough? Am I providing for them in the way that they need to be provided for? What will be the impact of on their lives, of the exceptionality of the one that we're living? And exceptionality is an important word because it comes with both very positive things and sometimes some negative things. And we have to remember to see both sides of those things. And now in my work at Courageous Parents Network, I not only see so much of what my own children experienced in the other siblings that I have the privilege of interacting with, but I also have the opportunity to feel less alone in my experiences because I talk to so many families who are experiencing the same thing as they too are trying to parent all of their children in the best way possible. And I'm so excited that you've joined us here tonight to find communion in that goal together. And then today, just today, actually, through my work at Courageous Parents Network, I had the opportunity to be on a team with 12 other clinicians, researchers, child life specialists, one other parent, to talk about how to help siblings have more resources in the school environment, which we know they spend a lot of time in. And I can tell you over the I mean, my children are 27 and 31 now, so that's a lot of distance to be parenting. But in that time, I have seen such a growth and interest in the research around the sibling concerns. And this is why I'm so particularly excited to have Dr. Plante here with us tonight to speak about those common concerns of siblings, to help us understand them better as parents, to look for ways that we might intervene when possible, or maybe just sit with them when that's all that we can do. But also to have her say to you, to celebrate the positives that are coming from this experience, because I think as parents, we tend to worry so much that we forget to look sometimes to the positive things that our children might be acquiring, even as their lives are exceptional. So let me introduce Dr. Plante to you and we'll get started. A couple of business things that I forgot to cover, which is that this is recorded. We love when you leave your cameras on. We will send a follow-up email, so don't feel like you have to take notes. You'll get a recording of this. And please join us on the 24th of April for our next event. And please use the chat since we're such a big group. We usually love to have people raise their hands and ask questions, but we're over 50 now and that might not be possible. So please put questions in the chat. We have a couple other coworkers here tonight to manage those questions. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Wendy Plante, who is the Director of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Outpatient Services and Pediatric Behavioral Health Integration at Hasbro Children's Hospital, which is in Rhode Island. She is Clinical Professor of Psychology and Human Behavior at Brown University. She comes to us tonight with over 20 years working with siblings of medically complex children and their families, and has done an array of research on sibling needs. We are so fortunate to have her join us tonight. She will also be joining us in April when we bring you a panel of the siblings themselves to tell you what they themselves want. So Dr. Plante, if you would please get started.
Thank you so much for having me. I will work on sharing my screen and then I will be ready to go. Oops, sorry. Always takes me a minute. How's that?
That's great.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for coming to this presentation. I am very passionate about siblings, and a lot of my work has been just working closely with siblings and their parents, doing groups and interviewing siblings to find out what things are like for them and how we can address their needs. So why do I care about siblings and why are you here? Well, first of all, in the US, most children have siblings. Most parents are raising more than one child. And those numbers are even higher than they used to be if we include step siblings and half siblings and foster children. Um, and typical children, typically in families, children spend more time with their siblings than anyone else in a lot of circumstances. They may be with babysitters together, or sometimes they may be in the same school. And siblings can really have an impact on your day to day life and your trajectory. Our popular culture tells us that siblings are really important. They are often the first people we play with. We learn social skills from them. We learn how to manage conflict with siblings. And our lifetimes, in some cases, but not all, can overlap more than with parents. And over time, what we often expect with siblings is that in adulthood, they might be friends and sources of support. And if you look at these covers of magazines, in ordinary times, there's a lot made out of birth order and who's in your family and what's it like to be an only child. There's a lot of emphasis on what it's like to be a brother or sister. But we know that we're here because we're also talking about not so ordinary times. And if we think about the stressful events in childhood, chronic illnesses, and other types of lifetime syndromes. If we look at what those magazine covers now show us, we see a child by themselves. And in some cases, we don't even see a picture of a child or a person. And I think that this represents what can sometimes happen in that I work in a hospital and we talk about family centered care, but often siblings become invisible. And we forget, we often think about the children and we think about their parents, and we forget about the other children in the family. And we often never get to see them because they don't come to our treatment spaces. But we do know parents are very concerned, as Jennifer said, about how their other children are. Oftentimes, that's the first question a parent asks when there is a new diagnosis. Um, how will I tell my other children? How will it affect the lives of my other children? So, why do we focus on children with medical complexity and their siblings? Well, we often talk about rare condition and these experiences impacting small numbers of family, but I think the numbers are quite large if you look at how many people are affected on a daily basis. And increasingly, children who used to be cared for in hospitals for certain treatments or in residential facilities are cared for at home. There's a lot of home-based care, and that affects the whole family. And we know that stressful experiences affect parents, they affect the family resources, the family finances, schedules, living arrangements, and siblings are a part of all that. And siblings also are often involved in treatment and they may become caretakers or guardians over the course of their lives. So this is just a roadmap of where we're going to go today. So we're going to start with talking about how do these experiences affect siblings. What are the unique experiences that they go through? Like, how are their day-to-day lives different because there's a complex medical uh, diagnosis in their family? And then how does it affect siblings? And why do some siblings do really well? And why do others not? And that's what we're all here for, is, really to know how can we encourage healthy adjustment when there is a very stressful situation in the family, and what are some resources? I think my screen stuck for a second. Hold on. Okay. So we know that there are very unique things on siblings' minds when they have someone in their family who is experiencing medical crises, is undergoing treatment. And it can affect how siblings grow and adjust when we think about children and adolescents. And it can also affect their how they spend their day in terms of household responsibilities. So first, we'll look at the different experiences that are unique that other kids on the playground or in the classroom might not be going through. One is that just, how your house is arranged, who sleeps whether there's equipment. There may be a lot of visitors coming to your home. Also, when there's a serious condition, parents often are not home. They are at professional appointments with the other child. They may be away for long periods of time in the hospital. We've often said that, the arrangements where parents can sleep over in hospitals is so wonderful for children and parents, but it's not so great for siblings. They spend less time with their parents, and they often may be doing lots of sleepovers with other members of the family. And they're also seeing a lot of stress at various points of time, where they may see their brother or sister suffering, where they are likely to see their parents worried. And parents' time and attention, of course, is going to be shifted, changed, sometimes more, some days more than others. And siblings, through nobody's intention, but siblings are often likely to get less attention or less positive attention from strangers, from people at school sometimes, in addition to family members and medical professionals. And we'll be looking at that. So what kinds of things are on siblings' minds, and what are some of their needs? So first of all, of course, they're concerned about the other child, and they are limited in their information. They rely on parents for information about what is this called, what caused it. Young kids are likely to blame things on themselves if they don't have a lot of information. What's it going to be like over time? Is there anything that can make this better? Who are all these professionals coming in and out? How can I help my brother and sister? And what's the future going to look like? They also have thoughts and feelings about their parents. So what do my parents expect from me? Do they want me to help? Do they want me to act normal? Whatever normal is. Do they want me to be overly concerned? When am I going to see, my mom again? I haven't seen her in a few days because she's at the hospital. And what can I do to help parents? Even very young children will be thinking about how they can help or sometimes protect parents. And they might have concerns and thoughts about themselves, like, are my emotions, am I supposed to be feeling this way when I feel angry, when I feel when I wish I had, the outing didn't get canceled today because something changed with my brother or sister. They may worry about their own health and development in certain situations, like, is that going to happen to me? Is that contagious? And they may have thoughts about their relationship with their brother or sister, like, why can't I play with my sister the way my friends play with their sister, for example? Or they might just miss their brother or sister when they're in the hospital, for example. And then, of course, this extends to outside the house. So, there are points in time where they may wonder how to tell friends or may be careful that they don't want to tell friends. They want to have a sphere where they don't have to talk about what's going on. They may be asked a lot of questions and may be an ambassador for the family, where a lot of people say, "Oh, how's your brother doing?" And sometimes, unfortunately, we still hear about bullying and teasing. And they may feel guilty when they have social events, when they get to go do things that their brother or sister just can't do due to the brothers and sisters' mobility issues, limitations, or illness or contagion. And these things can change over time when siblings are at the point where they're thinking about romantic relationships or going away to college potentially. And so thinking about the future, of course, how brother and sister is doing becomes important in those milestones and transitions and planning. How will I still be able to have the relationship I want with my sibling? Um, if they're a bereaved sibling, you know, how do I let people know that actually I had a brother or sister and if they're still a part of my life, even though they're not here? Making decisions about college, career that are impacted by that, what that either the pull to stay home and be involved and be helpful, or the desire to have some distance and the emotions that can come up with that. And then thinking about what's the future going to look like as my parents, um, get older. And we have to think about those kinds of things. And siblings can sometimes be advocates, really thinking about their sibling in the community, being involved in fundraisers, thinking about, my brother or sister should be able to go places and be able to have access to a building, for example. And so they can often think about those larger concerns, and sometimes even at a younger age than we would expect. One thing that we'll talk about is that a lot of what I'm talking about applies regardless of diagnosis. I work with a lot of medically involved families. I also work with families of children with developmental disabilities and psychiatric concerns, and a lot of these are very common. But then there are some differences based on diagnoses, some things that might be unique about the experience. So we often think about one of the areas where there is more research on siblings, and that's in the cancer field. And we know a cancer diagnosis comes with fear and uncertainty, not something that children are generally born with. So it becomes a sudden shift where siblings are trying to understand what's going on, and parents are thinking about how to explain things, and often a prolonged period where things are really disrupted in terms of routines, a lot of separations from siblings. And there are some commonalities and some unique kinds of situations when there's a rare genetic condition. Because it's rare, oftentimes siblings may feel like it's even harder to find someone who understands what this is like. Parents are less likely to be able to find books or videos that they feel fit their situation to use to explain things to their children. And there often are implications with how the diagnosis came about in terms of genetic testing, thinking about the carrier status of the sibling, and the sibling thinking about their own family planning when that's relevant. But across these diagnoses, some common experiences are just feeling like family life revolves around the other kid. And it has to be that way. And siblings can understand that, but can have a lot of emotions about that. One theme that we're going to talk a lot about is siblings who feel like, you know what, I'm the healthy one, I'm the well child. I need to not have problems, or I need to not be bringing problems to my parents, not wanting to burden others. And oftentimes we'll be talking about how older siblings, adult siblings, look back on their experience with perspective. And one thing that they often will say is like, well, that was normal. My brother was a regular kid, and I always saw him that way, even if others didn't. Or, the way my family had to do things. And, everything was up in the air and things would shift. Like that was normal. It took me a while before I realized that other people didn't see that as normal. And another commonality is just sort of uncertainty about what the day will hold, and in many cases about what next week or next month will look like. So when we think about the experience for siblings, their role can shift. So what that can look like is that, first of all, we know we're talking a lot about how this is all impacting brothers and sisters, but brothers and sisters also have a role in the family. And that can be positive and negative. Those of us, oftentimes when I'm in a small group, I ask people about their own sibling experience, and I share mine. We know that even in the best of circumstances, sibling relationships can be complex. And siblings can also be companions and friends to the other child in the family. They can be providing, and they often do, provide support to their parents, support to the other child, and play like a practical role with helping. And they can help with medical treatment sometimes. And we'll be talking about what that can be like for them and for the rest of the family. And one thing that we'll talk about is that feeling like you're a part of things and feeling like you're helping can actually serve a positive role for siblings under the right circumstances, of course. So when we think about siblings as helpers, there are some benefits. It can be a part of feeling like it's not just I'm in the shadows and this is like a project between my parents and the other child, and no one tells me anything and I just go off to school. It can be a part of feeling like you're part of the, like, this is our family is all in this together and I have a role. It can relieve that sense of like there's nothing I can do in this situation, that sense of lack of control, but like, oh, there's things I can do. I recently read an article from a parent who was saying that they told their young child if their baby brother or sister was having a seizure, like, why don't you go get him a stuffed animal? When he comes out of this, he's really going to want to hug that stuffed animal. And even a really young child can have a feeling of I'm contributing and I can do something in a scary situation. And of course, being a helper can enhance that bond, especially when your brother or sister maybe can't do all the things you wish they could do with you out in the backyard or, out with your friends. And what we hear and what we see in research is that there are some things we want to think about when we think about siblings as being helpers. Um, and some of those things are, offering it as an opportunity, making sure that it's not a situation where like everything's always about your brother or sister, but there are some things that you can help with, and making sure it's not taking a focus away from other kind of normative things that the sibling can have a part of, so that they're helping, but they're not giving up opportunities to see friends or to have some time doing some of those things. And that they can sometimes, if they get the sense that they can say no sometimes, then that will really help them to get those benefits of feeling involved and feeling like they are a helper. So now we're going to turn to one of the big questions is, well, how are siblings negatively affected? We talked about all these experiences, these thoughts, these emotions that can come up. And the thing that we're, of course, all afraid of is the negative impact. So it's really mixed when you look at research on siblings. And partly it's because we're thinking about siblings of different ages and developmental levels, different diagnoses, different places in the journey. But there's, if the one thing that we can say is there's a lot of variability. But siblings, they're at greater risk for having higher levels of stress and negative emotions, but many do very well. It is not a dire negative picture across the board, but they do have needs that we want to be aware of. There are those who struggle and then it resolves. In some cases, as there's a period of adjustment from initial shock or initial, certain medical crises, there's some recovery that can happen. And we know that when siblings do struggle, we see more of those internal emotions, those things they might hold in, like anxiety, worry, guilt. And we see a little bit less of that than acting out, becoming violent, although those things can happen too. But what we see is kind of high stress, and we can see that sometimes play out in school life, where siblings may be missing as much school as their brother or sister who has an illness, more than other kids. And they may be involved in fewer social events because we know what that's like for families to manage transportation, unpredictability. The things that stress parents out are the kinds of things that can get in the way of getting siblings involved in things. And we know that in particular, one of the things we want to be on the lookout for, especially those of us who see siblings professionally and think about screening them, is for post-traumatic stress. So that even years later, there are some siblings who have nightmares, flashbacks, really try to avoid reminders of the experience. And again, it's not across the board, but the rates are higher for siblings who have had their brother or sister involved in a lot of stressful medical events. And then the other side of the picture is that we really, my field has been really focused on psychopathology and what are all the damage, but really our field is coming a long way in recognizing that there's other things that can happen. And so we talk a lot about resiliency and now look for it when we look at the impact of what can happen in your life. And we do see resilience and a positive impact for siblings. And sometimes you can see this more when you talk with siblings who are older, who are looking back in time. And what we hear is that I, I was alone more, or I had, but I had to, I became mature more. I wasn't worrying about the little things in life that the other kids in middle school were worrying about. I learned how to do a lot of things on my own, and that was really great because it gave me self-esteem. That was good for my self-esteem. That was good for, experiences I had later, when I went to college. We often hear about siblings becoming advocates and really also just having a lot of really being the ones who reach out to the person who's different or the person who has no friends in the playground, having a high sense of empathy. Also, gratitude. I'm thankful for my own health. I'm thankful for my strengths. I'm thankful for my brother or sister and my family. So sometimes we hear about more closeness in the family or increased communication. And I'm proud of what we accomplished, like the little things where we move forward with things. And we do hear more about siblings joining helping professions, partly maybe because they're exposed to those role models early in life through home visitors and having to go to all those medical appointments. And there's some research showing that siblings of people with medical complexity actually have more of this post-traumatic growth than young adults who've gone through other traumatic or stressful events. This is something about this that can lead to more growth. So you're not just okay, but you actually have grown from it, and there are internal benefits. So, the million-dollar question is, how do we help siblings to be okay and develop some of these benefits or the growth? And these are not surprising. They're the kinds of things that help all children do better, but the extent to which parents are getting support and parents are working on coping can help their children, all of their children. So parents who are getting a lot more support, who are doing better because they're working on their own coping or getting resources. Families who have, even though things can be unpredictable and can be chaotic, have some routines they try to follow, try to build some predictability and routine into life. Communication, which we'll continue to talk about. So siblings who are getting age-appropriate information and not left in the dark, know they can ask questions. And siblings who feel involved. And even if it's not equal, feel that, you know, my parents are checking in with me, or other people are checking in with me when my parents can't, I can make them feel like they're important too. And so that's that feeling of connection. So what are signs that siblings are doing better? Siblings who talk and ask questions. We joke about siblings who complain. We worry. We think that's good. That they're telling us what's worrying them. They're telling us what like bummed them out that day. So there's a little bit of a balance where they can tell us about the good and the bad and not just one or the other. They're also not just trying to protect their parents from and shield them from their own thoughts and feelings. And siblings who are able to, you know, pursue some of their own activities and friendships and don't feel like, oh, I can't leave the house, either because I don't have the opportunity or because I would feel too guilty. So we joke that, you know, these are the complaints or some of the worries that siblings might say. What about me? Can you know, why me? How come when I do that, you know, you react differently than when he does? When are my home visitors coming? Um, and so comments often are just helpful for parents to know what's going on. And we often say the worst comments are no comments at all when they're too quiet or trying to shield parents. And so, what do siblings need? This comes from sibling interviews, interviews with parents and professionals who work with siblings. They need information. They need to know that people understand or are trying to understand their perspective, help with dealing with the emotional roller coasters, learning strategies, having company and support, especially when parents can't be around. And instrumental support is just like who's going to help you with your homework, who's going to drive you to your soccer game. And these are ways in which um, oftentimes we're working with families to think about who their village is and who are, like you were mentioning, the school, people in the school who can keep an eye out for this kid or give them a break when they didn't do their homework. So we're often thinking about how to bridge that. And so helping siblings understand what's this called, when they're little, what body parts affected, how does it change things, what didn't cause it, what caused it, what do people do to make it, try to make it, either make the situation better or make today better for brothers and sisters. And but we often work with parents and we help them understand that sometimes it's not what you say but how you say it, and just opening up the conversation that really makes impact. And you know, seeing what are the questions. Maybe they didn't want to know all that detail that you know you were going to tell them. So finding out what that basic question might be, and sometimes not trying to fix the problem, as Jennifer was saying, but just sitting with the sibling and understanding the message behind their words, and trying to do it um, in a time and place when you can be calm and just have that sibling know that you've got some time, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, to hear what they're going through. So you know, we're talking about ways that parents can be responsive, but also other extenders. And so there's a lot of resources on the Courageous Parents Network for siblings. So this is just a little sample, but just to think about what kind of programs are out there. Maybe where your child's getting their care. Some of them have a sibling page. The occasional hospital has a sibling room, but what's out there for siblings? There's more and more than there used to be, which is really great to see. And then thinking about if you do have the benefit of having programs in your area or camps for siblings, um, camps and programs, even if they're 1 day workshops, even if they're telehealth, often are trying to enhance that sense for siblings that you're important too. You've got a lot. What are your strengths? Look at all these other people who are going through similar things, and giving parents a sense that here's something for my other child. And that can really feel good for parents and help alleviate their guilt. And then these are just examples of little activities that different groups, including this for my sibling group that we do, different activities, games that just help kids to share and feel a part of things. Other examples of national groups that are out there for siblings. And then some siblings need more. They may need to meet with a counselor or a therapist, but the photos on here don't just include sad siblings, because even siblings who are doing great can sometimes benefit from having that extra person that they can talk with. But these are kind of, more of your yellow or red flags for siblings who may be struggling more. When you really see it showing up consistently at school or in behavior problems, always negative and hopeless in what they talk about, or starting to, have a lot of aches and pains, trouble sleeping or eating. These are just, maybe good to reach out to the network and see what else you can get them in terms of support. So what are our basic recommendations? We've been kind of talking about them along the way, but giving kids information in small doses, um, when new things come up, in an age appropriate way, being honest and discussing your own feelings at times, like when you're frustrated about something or feel sad or feel disappointed, and periodically just checking in with them on what's been going on with them. And also thinking about things that might be coming up that might be a challenge. It could be a long hospitalization where you're going to be away, for example. This is really, I was introduced to this a few years ago. It's on the Alex's Lemonade Stand website. It's the KISS form. I forget what it stands for. It says it really tiny, but it's a form that you give someone who's taking care of the sibling, their favorite foods, their bedtime, what helps them calm when they're feeling anxious. And it can be very practical for the aunt who's taking care of them or the babysitter, but also shows that sibling if you sit down and fill it out together, we're really looking out for your needs, even though I might not be there overnight. When siblings help out, showing that you appreciate their extra, the extra things they put in. Parents also trying to, be a role model in terms of when you can, showing that you're doing self-care and what you do when you're having a negative emotion. And regularly giving siblings attention. And we often talk about it's pennies in the bank. If you wait, if you want to build up your bank account, you wait until you can, just deposit $100, it's not going to happen often. So where are the 5 minutes you can play tic-tac-toe with your sibling, or pull them aside and take them on an errand and kind of build it up there. And remembering that sibling relationships are not always perfect in the best scenario, even when there's no stress, and so remembering, if you are a sibling, remembering back to how, what those relationships were like, and not expecting siblings to be saints. So I know I'm preaching to the choir that siblings are important. They are important in each other's lives, especially and including when there's illness or disability or, challenges. There's positive and negative effects, and siblings tend to do well, but they've got some risks we have to be aware of. And they do have a lot of needs that often are very difficult to get met. And so thinking about those things can go a long way in doing some planning when challenges arise, and helping siblings by giving them information and having your network help with that. And that siblings really do best when they feel connected. So the small ways they can feel connected to their family and to their social world can make a really big difference. So this is thank you for coming, but I don't want everyone to leave. It's just the place I'm pausing where we can get reactions, get questions. So I'll sit back.
Thanks, Wendy, so much for that. Really resonated with me. I mean, I particularly liked the part where you spoke about, not trying to always fix everything for the siblings. And I know my own kids will often remark now as adults, as a family, we spent so much time trying to problem solve because we had to, right? We live with
Yeah.
a medically complex child. We spend a lot of time problem solving, and that every problem became a situation to fix when in fact they just wanted to come and bring their simple little everyday problem without somebody trying to solve it all the time. And even now, we lean towards that tendency in our household and are working hard with a therapist to get rid of it. So thanks for bringing that up. I think it's an interesting attribute of what can happen in our families. We had one mom ask, I think it's a mom, what are some strategies when to encourage the sibling who's affected and probably has the capacity to engage at a higher level than, for example, my son did with his brother and sister, um, to encourage that child to interact with their sibling and involve them in their medical care when the sibling themselves might be saying, I don't want my brother and sister in this space. So what can we do what could parents do to help foster that situation? Or should they be trying to foster it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And like so many of these situations, I think knowing your own children and trying to assess, um, where that child who needs that medical care, where are they at in terms of, are they at the point where they're really trying to develop some independence? And that's really their goal right now. And that's why they're pushing back for that involvement. Is there embarrassment? Is there something that's going on in that sibling relationship that you weren't aware of, like, something that happened yesterday? So I guess sort of the biggest thing I would think about is kind of taking a breath and thinking about what's the situation and what's everyone's motivation. And sometimes it may be a situation where the sibling wants to help and it is pulling them aside and showing them appreciation for them wanting to help and helping them understand why now is not the best time, why they're getting some pushback, and then maybe helping them with another outlet where they can feel like they're being helpful to the family, but in a way that's not causing so much friction.
Mm.
And that's again me not knowing the exact situation. So I guess it's like a be thoughtful and assess kind of approach.
Yeah, as you said, every unique sibling relationship is unique. We had another question in the chat, a parent who asks, when to involve a therapist? Is it if your child, if one of your children is diagnosed with something, should you involve a therapist for your other children right away? Or what's the point at which that becomes a necessity?
Yeah.
In your opinion?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times it depends on, what the family's resources are, but their energy level, their stress level, and I don't want parents to feel like you need to immediately get a therapist, and if you're not doing that, you're doing a disservice to your children. Um, I think I wish I could read the chat. I can't do 2 things at once, but I think someone just made a really good comment. Um, but I was gonna say that, I do think that it can be a good approach if you have the energy and the resources to do some early intervention, because sometimes the sibling having someone who's kind of assessing the situation, helping with delivering information, helping, with planning for certain things could be a really great resource um, before a situation um, where things where, the sibling develops more problems with adjusting to the situation. So I think it can't be too early, but I don't want parents to feel pressured that they've got to like get someone immediately. And depending on the age of the sibling may say, I don't really want this right now. And that might be another situation where you have those conversations and make the best assessment you can as a parent of what that kid needs right now. And it might not be a therapist in that moment.
I think too, just normalizing the idea of having a therapist. So to say to
Mhm.
your kids, even if it's not a time that they need to engage, I know it was helpful for me to be able to say out loud, I go and talk to somebody about this because sometimes I'm feeling sad or sometimes I'm feeling scared. And do you want to talk to me about that, or would it help you to talk to and it could be their grandparent. It doesn't always have to be the therapist, right? But just to normalize from an early point of view that talking to somebody about the situation is a positive experience.
Yeah, and I really, as I was talking about my wish for siblings is that there be so many different levels of support. It might not be a therapist. It might be going to a camp. It might be, on the hospital floor playing with the child life specialist who's going to lead you in an art project that is actually very therapeutic. So that's my wish for siblings is that there be lots of avenues for support that all help them to achieve what you were just talking about, which is to be able to be seen and to be able to express and have people help you with your needs. I know there's so many questions in the chat
Yeah.
and I can't keep up.
So here's another one. How do you prepare a healthy older sibling for a terminal illness in a younger sibling? And
I feel we could have a whole presentation on that. And so one thing I will ask those of you who are with Courageous Parents Network, if you can comment on some of the resources that you would recommend.
I think that just from my having lived a life with two children who lived into their son's disease, again, my daughter was in high school and my son was a freshman, sophomore in college when his brother passed away. So they had both grown into it. My oldest child was 4 when my son was diagnosed. That I'm not sure that you can prepare them for that. I think the key information that we got was to speak to them and answer the questions they were asking and not go any deeper or harder. Sometimes they're not ready. My older son didn't really understand his brother's diagnosis until he was probably 7 or 8. And we just explained his differences by saying, there are people that are blind and they can't see, your brother can't do this. We would just sort of casually talk about it. And my daughter, who was younger and came into the situation when my son Ben was more medically complex, came to that question sooner and said, is my brother going to not, we drove past a college and I told her what it was. And she said, well, will Ben ever go to college? And I said, well, I don't think so. And then she asked the question and said, well, does that mean he's not going to grow up? Is he going to die? And she asked it and she was 3.5. And I answered it honestly, but I waited. And I think, I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm just answering this from my personal experience, but that there's one way to prepare your children. I think you have to read in, and then as Wendy said, look for resources. We have a great guide on Courageous Parents Network about how to communicate with your siblings. It has a developmental chart so you can read and position your child and where they are developmentally. And and then understand, as you had to sort of soften your way into the experience, so will your siblings, right? Or will your other children, and give them the grace, and then seek professional support when you think it really is necessary. And the last thing I will say is, don't be shy about involving all of those other people that are touching your children, the teachers, the friends, the grandparents. Enlist them as your army and get them to help you in this process and to support those siblings.
And we were just talking earlier before this presentation about, books for children, books for parents that help. So I'm always on the lookout for resources that parents can share with their children. And also, we often talk about a lot of these conversations, whether it's what the diagnosis is or conversations about end of life, that they're often not a one or done. So you start having those conversations even with littles. Like we often say, you don't wait till your baby understands your words to say I love you. You start saying some words and you add, and it becomes a process.
I just want to add that in just a reminder to the parents here that even if you have all the support in the world and you do the most beautiful, exquisite job communicating with your children, the siblings, there will still be some fallout because how can there not be some fallout? And when there is some fallout, your child or the siblings can be okay. So when there's some element of fallout, that doesn't mean you have failed as the protector of your child and communicating and getting them support. Like, it is inevitable because this is a difficult thing that's happening. So please don't in any way feel like that's evidence that you're doing a bad job as the parent of your other children. It's some of this is just part of the situation, and it can still be okay.
Wendy, I see that Yasmin has her hand raised.
Yes,
Yasmin, do you
yes.
want to ask your question?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say that first of all, I'm Yasmin. I'm from Cincinnati. I have a younger sister who is in hospice. I'm 15 years old, and what I wanted to say was that as like there really is, as you said, there is no correct way to go through grief, especially when it's like a sibling, because typically, well, siblings aren't supposed to pass away when you're still young. There's no real way to prep for this, but I'd say like what my parents have done is a step by step walk through with you and knowing that there is no technically a right way.
Mm.
And it's also okay to like not be okay.
Mhm.
You can't go through grieving your sibling. Like my sister is 12 years old. I am watching her slowly decline. She's on a ventilator, she's undiagnosed, and like it's like slowly taking away stuff that she can do. And it hurts. And it would be weird if I didn't feel sad sometimes and if I didn't fall apart sometimes. Because that is my sister. I've spent the last 12 years of my life with her. And so that's another thing to remember is that helping, like in this case, like you'd say helping your child, or yeah, helping your child, both of them, is to remember it's okay to not be okay. And that it is not necessarily a week by week or even day by day. Sometimes it's hour by hour. Everyone's grieving process is unique. And it's important to remember that too. But yeah, those are just my thoughts.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Of course, yeah.
Yasmin. Oh.
Thank you.
Mm.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the chat. I'm trying to scroll back into the chat. We have one question from a caregiver who's feeling burnt out and having trouble finding that delicate balance of time and ability to pay attention to all the members of her family. And Wendy, what sort of advice
Yeah.
would you give her as she's worrying about, you know, the siblings and herself?
Yeah, I think that that's where it can be helpful to just think about who can't, you can't do it all. You can't do it all. And there's going to be days where you're going to do less of it and you have to take care of yourself. And so thinking about, again, like, is there someone at the school? Is there one of your children's friends who, takes them for the day? Are there relatives who can give a little extra attention, even if it's like sending a postcard or a card to your children? So, and that sometimes those little things can be pretty meaningful for kids. And so, I mean, it may sound just like like too simple, but like you can't do everything, and finding those little things you can do on a particular day and extending it to other people who can be a support, knowing that you can't do it all. And that you taking a break for yourself, sometimes your kids might not understand it, but it's really going to be better long term. Who are your supports, who can be helpful when you're feeling burnt out.
I think too, just pointing that out to your siblings, like I need to go take this bath right now for 30 minutes because I need to recharge. And sometimes I see that you have to go do this, whether it's go be on your iPad or, read your book, and the siblings have to recharge too. And just having, I found with my own kids, just having that conversation where we're intentional about talking about the strategies that we're using instead of it letting it be sort of a silent thing that was going on in our household was a helpful tactic.
Yeah, I really like that because then you're again being like a role model. And then you can also have sometimes you can have that conversation and say, you know, I wasn't happy with how yesterday went. I really I wanted to ask you how your test went, and I realized the whole day passed. I'm really sorry I didn't have the, you know, I forgot about that yesterday, or I had no energy when I got home. And sometimes that kind of honesty can be helpful too.